Folks, here we are. We have suited up for the last 100 episodes of the Soul Sessions. And, well, here we are. This is it. Season 3, episode 100. As you know, I am your host, Soul. And I thought, what better to get a man who's maybe about the culture, likes to fly a bit high, former Impact Tag Team Champion, former WWE NXT UK Tag Team Champion, former Rev Pro Undisputed British Tag Team Champion, as well as a former Progress Champion and a former Progress Tag Team Champion, Mark Andrews. Welcome to the Soul Sessions.
Thank you for having me, my friend. I'm excited to have a chat.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure, Mark. So I'll say the old saying I've done for the previous 99 guests, Mark. Every guest has a story, and every story has a beginning. Mark, how did your story begin as a wrestling fan?
As a wrestling fan, so I started wrestling at 8 years old, and I've often said different matches as the first match that I first saw. But I spoke to my cousin a few years ago, and he reminded me that the first match that I ever saw was the Hardys versus the Dudleys at Royal Rumble 2000. And I always confuse that for the ladder match that happened 2 months later at WrestleMania. But those were the early matches I saw anyway. The first one starting at Royal Rumble. And yeah, wrestling just it grabbed me from there. I was in love with it almost instantly. I was one of the kids who didn't have Sky when I was that young. I got it a bit later. So I was always trying to catch up on, Channel 4 and even Channel 5 at one point when I think like WWF Heat was on there. But yeah, my big cousin, Andy, he got me into wrestling at first. And being a fan then for about 4.5 years, every single Christmas was wrestling toys and DVDs, and just I was obsessed. And because I started actually training them myself at 12 years old, a week before I turned 13, I quite quickly, in the grand scheme of things, went from being just a fan to a fan and, attempting to be a wrestler, a trainee wrestler at that point.
Well, hey, man, you've done it all, my friend, indeed. And obviously, what I think is so fascinating as well with the UK, like, obviously, our wrestling is a bit delayed back in the day, like Monday Nitro and WWF be aired a bit of a later time. And I think what was very important to our scene, and as I mentioned with many other guests, is the tape trading scene. Like, I feel with that, it basically helped build up our knowledge and love for wrestling. I want to know for your thoughts on that, Mark. Do you think the tape trading scene that happened in the UK is basically the result we have now with so many other promotions with it up and down the UK?
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that tape trading in the UK kind of goes hand in hand with the wrestling channel. Do you remember the wrestling channel on Sky? And I felt like that whole scene, because I remember being I was maybe a bit too young for actually tape trading. However, I remember ordering like DVDs from high spots of like bizarre Japanese promotions and stuff like Toramon DVDs, watching, Liger and Ultimo Dragon and all those guys, and stuff that you couldn't really find very easily in the UK at shops or anything like that. I don't think HMV really stocked that type of stuff. So I do think tape trading is really what like started this kind of cult following of indie wrestling fans. And obviously early millennium, you had like the Ring of Honor shows coming over here with FWA. You had the Wrestling Channel showing Noah, FWA, RQW. I think some Ring of Honor as well, like CZW and stuff. And that was all kind of like on the fringe of the mainstream wrestling world, right? And I feel like in the UK, there was just these pockets around the country who are all into like indie wrestling, Japanese wrestling, Mexican wrestling. And that tag teamed up we had the UKFF. Do you remember that? The old UK wrestling fan forum. And that was kind of where a lot of these diehards and these tape traders, I guess, kind of grouped together and talked online. So yeah, I think that must be the beginning of kind of, that cult following of indie wrestling and non-mainstream wrestling in the UK was tape trading, the forums, the wrestling channel.
Hey, it definitely built our wonderful scene with so many fans in this day and age, maybe getting evolved from that sort of aspect of the wrestling world. But obviously, with the tapes as well, you would walk into a good old Blockbuster and you would see the covers. The covers are what strike you. You see all the lovely covers and not even know what's happening inside the tape, but you would see that cover and it would strike you, making you want to spend your old £2.50, not buy a Freddo, and you would get that case. So I want to know, Mark, what is your favorite sort of maybe wrestling poster or wrestling tape cover?
Oh, let me have a think. Well, do you know what? You actually, even by just saying that then, brought some nostalgia into my head. Because I remember buying a 2-pack in HMV, or maybe it was Virgin Megastores back then, I'm not even sure. But it was a 2-pack of King of the Ring 2000 and Capital Carnage. And the Capital Carnage cover was sick. It was like an old 90s looking kind of poster with all the wrestlers just there. Like your box standard kind of wrestling poster. But I remember being a big fan of that when I was a kid because it was from, it was in the UK. I think it was in Manchester. Or Liverpool, maybe. I'm going to go with Manchester. But yeah, favorites VHS artwork. Here's another one that I bought when I was a kid, which I actually regretted buying afterwards because a WCW VHS was cheaper than a WWF one, and I thought I'll get more VHSs for my money here. And I brought Spring Slam from back in the day. I can't remember what year it was, maybe 98 or 99. And the front cover was the 4 guys in the main event, which was like Hogan. I want to say it was Hogan, Flair, Brett and Sting. I mean, I was never a big WCW guy, so maybe someone listening to this will be critical of my bad memory here. But yeah, that had sweet artwork though. Spring Slam, either 98 or 99. Great artwork right there.
Hey, a banger right there indeed. It's funny you mentioned 2 individuals there, Ric Flair and Sting, because, next year, Revolution for AEW, we're going to see Sting's final match. And from someone, who kind of got into wrestling maybe a bit later in my lifetime, just seeing what Sting means to wrestling. The man's the icon. It's in his name with what he's done and what he's contributed to the whole business. I want to know, Mark, for Sting's entire career, is there a particular rivalry or even match that you look at and think that is what Sting is?
Oh, that's a hard. But as I said, when I was younger, I was a lot more into WWF and WCW, right? But you'd always hear of Sting being this huge name who, and unfortunately, never came over in like the Invasion era and that sort of time, which would have been the best, right? I know, obviously, a lot of people aren't a fan of like Sting's more recent WWE run, and with good reason as well. He potentially wasn't used as well as he should have been. However, I remember live, not live in the building, but live wherever I was, probably in a bar with a load of friends, watching the match with Triple H at WrestleMania. And the pop for all the run-ins, for, everyone coming down, DX coming down, that was so sick. So for me, that's a really fond memory of a Sting match. I also will go ahead and say that his time in TNA was absolutely killer. So like everything he did in TNA, I thought was amazing. I'm not sure if you can count that as one storyline, but everything he did there was just sick. It felt like that's what you want to see Sting do. And to be honest, what he's doing in AEW right now is very similar to that. Like the stuff he's doing with Darby Allin at the moment really is like, it's up there as some of the best in his career, in my opinion. So honestly, as someone who never watched a lot of WCW when I was a kid, I would put the AEW stuff recently right at the top. The stuff he's doing with Darby, that crazy cinematic match that they had a while ago, that for me is like maybe, in my opinion, my favorite stuff that I've seen Sting do throughout his whole career. And again, some Sting fanatics might give me shit for this. They might think that, I'm choosing the newer stuff over the old stuff. But honestly, I think it's great. I think what he's been doing over the last few years is amazing. And it's kind of been the perfect few years before he calls it a day, because he's had such a great run in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. He really is. I mean, I saw him at Revolution 2022 in that freeway match with, the Hardy family office and him and Darby and Sammy. And that was just a spectacle, man jumping off the balcony into tables. I'm like, God damn, I think I'm only 25. And I think my hip's playing up. I mean, fair play to you, son.
I know, right? He smashed it, right? It was awesome.
He is an awesome guy as well. And I want to know though, Mark, obviously we've mentioned that he's pairing with Darby Allin mostly in tag matches, but final match at Revolution, do you think maybe it should be a singles, him versus Darby?
I mean, that would be my pick. When you look at how the last few years have gone, you'd almost want it to be like a passing of the torch between the two. I don't know though, right? I mean, that seems perfect. That would be the one that I would say to do. I can't really think of anyone else who would be up there to that level. But equally, if he's tagging with Darby too, that's still great. You know what I mean? However it ends up going, as long as it means something, as long as they put some thought into it, which I'm sure that they will, I think it's gonna be awesome. But my pick would be the singles versus Darby.
Hey, I would take that any day of the week. And I think that's what wrestling is, it's not only just the never say never moments, but it's creating the connection and the moments that people, when they walk out of the arena or turn off their telly, they just sit back there and think, yeah, that was a moment. That's a moment.
Exactly.
And you love that. But also, I know as well, Mark, that this year, past November, you celebrate, was it your 17th anniversary?
17 years since my debut, yeah.
Wow, congratulations, my friend. So I guess I'll hit the old heavy question. Looking back at those 17 years, how do you think you've grown as a wrestler?
Oh, I mean, I've grown as a wrestler and a person, figuratively and physically. I debuted at 14 years old. And yeah, I mean, so much has changed. Sometimes it's hard to even separate kind of my progress in wrestling and my progress in life as a whole. You know what I mean? Those teenage years are so formative for everyone, you know. And now I'm a 31-year-old man with a wife and a kid, and like real responsibilities. Whereas back then I was just a 14-year-old kid who loved wrestling, you know. So yeah, I guess everything's changed really, but something that at least in ring, I'm glad that I have learned. And I'll be honest, I've learned it later in my career than I think most do, and later than than some people would expect. But it's to kind of be more confident in my ability in the ring. When I was younger, I'd have this kind of go 110% mindset, and to always try your best with everything, and everything had to be as perfect as possible. But I'd give myself such a hard time for anything that wasn't, you know, 100% perfect, you know. And I think over the years, I've learned to be more forgiving of myself. And obviously that comes with experience, and that comes with, you know, achieving more in wrestling and kind of being able to feel, you know, a bit more well-fed. Whereas when I was younger, I might have been a bit hungrier for opportunity. But I'm very glad that I've learned that, because it definitely takes the pressure off and the stress off as well. You know, I can't emphasize how stressful it can be going into a wrestling match, whether that's in front of 10 people in your first year of your career or in front of, you know, 10,000 people 10 years into your career. It can be quite a nervous and stressful experience. So I'm really glad that over time that area of it has gotten easier for me.
Oh, definitely, Mark. I mean, I think it shows something with time. You know, time is very good, because with the flow of time, things can progress, you know, get better and develop. Because obviously, when I've had guests on who maybe debuted long ago in the old times when, you know, Betamax was the best thing around or something like that, we've seen the UK wrestling scene obviously thrive. And I remember hearing that, like, it wasn't many indie promotions. It was, you know, a lot of traveling to get bookings and just being on shows. And now they're everywhere. So many up in Scotland, Wales, London, and even Northern Ireland. Seeing that whole scene thrive and new promotions pop up everywhere, Mark, what does that mean to you as you know, a British wrestler?
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, you know, it's funny. A lot of fans and a lot of young wrestlers, even I think they think right now as being a bit of a drop off from the boom that we had. The boom that we had, I guess, back in 2014 to 2018, I'd say, you know. But when it got really hot, you know, when ICW was thriving, when Progress was thriving, when all these companies were coming up, and it was, you know, it was really hot. But it's funny because if you compare right now to a few years ago, it might feel like it's dropped off a little bit. However, if you compare right now to 10, 15 years ago, it's still up here. You know what I mean? Like I feel like we climbed all the way up and we've dropped off a little bit, and that's where it is. We've, you know, maybe we've plateaued right now just below where it had peaked in the grand scheme of things. Because, you know, for me, when I was starting out, there were two companies in Wales that were kind of in rivalry with one another. And I think there might have been 12 shows a year in Wales at most. Now I can tell you that, you know, there's some months that go by where you could maybe find 12 shows in a month, you know? And when I was younger, I was flying up to Scotland to wrestle, because there happened to be a better scene up there. But I'd be driving all the way to Kent to get better training and stuff like that. And these days there's so many schools everywhere around the country. There's so many shows all the time. So even if the numbers of the top companies are maybe a little bit lower than they were, or even a lot lower, you could argue, than they were a few years ago, they are still so much higher than they were back in the day when I started. And I think, you know, it's only a handful of people who are left on the scene who will remember that and realize that actually business is still booming. Business is really booming. You know, back then, there was so little going on, really. There was a handful of companies. So I do think that because of that boom that we had a few years ago, business is going to continue to be pretty good for a while now. I can't see it ever really dying off to the extent that it was back in 2006 when I started. You know, it was that there just wasn't a lot at all going on back then. And I can't see it anyway, at least in my lifetime, ever getting back to that level of that small of a scene.
No, of course. I mean, you see it, you know, with all the training schools, and you see how many students, you know, want to go and learn. Even we kids as well, just has a social class and an activity outside of school. And it's great to see. I mean, one thing stayed the same though, and that's Scottish tap water is still better than English tap water. That's 100% fact right there.
Hey, Welsh tap water is incredible though. We got clean water down here, so we'll be the same as Scotland.
I'll be honest, when I was down for Clash of the Castle, the only my intake was beer, so there was no water going in. That chance.
We got great beer as well. We're just like Scotland with beer and water, both tasting great.
Oh, the hangover after Clash of the Castle, yeah, I can verify that statement 100% true, my friend. Well, something I want to mention as well, Mark. I feel like, with wrestling fans, they react to different things. Like the Americans will react to their own thing, and Japanese crowds are very different with their culture. I don't know from yourself, Mark, do you feel like with the UK, like Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, do you think they're different? Do you think they're all in one same bunch, or do you think each division reacts to wrestling in the same way?
I think they are different. They are very different. You can definitely categorize the UK as a whole when it comes to fans, because you look at shows like Takeover Cardiff, right? That's personally for me my favorite show ever because of the moment that me and Flash got to have, but the crowd are just insane. And I don't just mean for that match, I mean for the whole show, chanting stuff. It was like they were an attraction in themselves. And then you go to Money in the Bank last year, the crowd again doing it, making up chants. They have that kind of like football mindset, which I think you don't get anywhere else. You don't get it out in America or in Japan, obviously, or anywhere else in the world. However, that being said, go to Scotland, right? We did the TNA show in Glasgow a few weeks ago, and it felt like the Scottish crowd I remember from when I used to wrestle there back in the day. It was loud, very proud. Same with Newcastle the next night, and it's been a long time since I've wrestled up in that area, like Newcastle way. And yeah, I do think you can differentiate crowds from around the UK, and I'm not sure if it's necessarily kind of like territory by territory or if it's company by company, because I definitely got the impression that up in Scotland we had a big amount of the old ICW crowd there to watch TNA. And I'd love to see what a crowd would be like in Wales for a show like TNA, you know what I mean? Because the indie crowd down here is fantastic, obviously different to the WWE crowd, but all in all, there's a lot of diehard fans down here. And we might not be as loud as the Scots, but we'll try to.
I have total faith in you, my friend. I think the Wales will represent very well in the crowd department. But obviously, you mentioned Flash there, and obviously I know Dani Luna as well. Subculture. I would love to know the story. How did Subculture form?
So it's funny, right? I think a lot of people assume that me and Flash had been a tag team for a long time, but in reality, we only started tagging in WWE because I think they saw two smaller, high-flying Welsh guys, and they thought, there you go, there's a team. When in reality, we've known each other since we were young, since we were about 14, 15. And we trained a lot in that time, and we hung around together. We've been close friends for a long time. But we only actually had a handful of singles matches, and I think we might have tagged with each other once or twice, a handful of times. So when they did put us together, it wasn't that instant chemistry that I think everybody was assuming, because we hadn't really tagged much before. So we started off as that, and we were kind of branding ourselves as South Wales Subculture. And then it was just before COVID hit. We wanted to kind of rebrand ourselves and make something that resembled less of just a tag team and more of a kind of a unit, you know what I mean? An actual team, more of a stable. Now, Dani Luna, she moved down to Cardiff to train with what at the time was called Dragon Pro Wrestling, a place that I trained at, now being rebranded to New Wave Wrestling Academy here in Wales. And it's the best training you can get down in Wales. So both me and Flash have quite a hand in training Dani. And she was kind of the perfect fit, really. We're all alternative people in terms of our music tastes and stuff like that, but we all kind of like different areas of that alternative scene, all different areas of Kerrang, if you will, so it felt like a perfect fit. And then it took so long to push it through. When you try and get something through to WWE Creative, it's not something that happens overnight necessarily, so we were pushing it for months and months. If people could see the effort we went through, we essentially made our own EPK, like a press kit to show NXT UK Creative, to be like, hey, look, this is going to be the logo, this is going to be the brand, here's a gear mock-up, all of this stuff. We went through so much effort to try and get it, try and get the green light on it. And then finally they did, and it was great. And unfortunately, it happened in that post-COVID era where we didn't have as many eyes on us as before COVID. But I'm still really glad that it did happen. And I guess the kind of the ethos of the team is a very DIY punk rock attitude. And we actually kind of live that to the core a bit, because all of our entrance jackets, Like I spray most of them myself. I know Gav does a lot of his. So Flash does a lot of his too. We spray our own jackets. We filmed our own entrance video. I edited the entrance video and designed the logo, the music, our entrance music that we use. It's actually written and recorded by my bandmate Matt from Junior. So it's all very in-house, and it's why we've been able to now take our logo, our entrance video, all of that stuff, all of that branding away from WWE and use it in TNA and use it on the indies and everywhere we go. And I'm really proud of that aspect of it, because I think that when wrestlers have their own creative control, it always translates better. You know, it's always better doing something that you've put effort and you've put heart into, instead of trying to kind of, you know, fit into a glove which someone else has given you, if that makes sense.
No, I hear you there, Pat. And I think that could be a very important point. Like maybe saying to like younger wrestlers, you may have the backing of the biggest wrestling company of all time, but you have to take chances on yourself, push yourself, show what your ideas are, put that pen to paper, because you may have the backing of the big machine, but you need to have chances on yourself. Would that be correct there, Mark?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I wish that I almost had that belief in myself early on in my time in WWE, because yeah, I think it resonates more than anything.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, even your time in WWE, you were successful as well. Obviously, you know, former NXT UK Tag Team Champions, those beautiful. Sorry, I'm getting emotional in there thinking of those belts. No,
I got my replica back there. There it is.
oh,
I'm one of those guys. I want that collection of all the belts I've had. So
they are beautiful belts as well. Obviously, you would win them as well. I want to know that moment, winning those beautiful titles in WWE, knowing like in the WWE record books, you're there as a tag team holding those tag team championships. That's got to be like a crowning achievement, mate, right?
yeah, it really is, and it's something. It's such a milestone for me in my career, and I still just hold it so dearly to my heart, because for me, I mean, it's funny, right? You know, in wrestling, a lot of people say stuff like, "Oh, you know, titles are just props. You know, you shouldn't look too much into it," or you know, it's the booker's decision kind of thing of who wins wins a championship. But for me, it just meant so much more than that. Because I mean, one, being in my hometown, you know, I mean, in Cardiff, I used to overlook that venue from my uni flat. Like literally, I could see it from the window of our kitchen, and I had my family in the crowd. You know, I had my sister and my now wife and my our nephew in the crowd watching us, and so many friends. And for me, it just, I don't know. I just guess it was the fact that it happened there. It happened in Wales with my best friends. You know, we got to do it together. The first Welsh champions in WWE history. It meant so much more than just winning a belt. It felt like, what was it at the time? I guess it was 15 years into my career. It felt like 15 years of hard work, or maybe less. Sorry, maybe 13 or 14 years. But 14 years of hard work to get to that moment. You know, it symbolizes for me years of my dad driving me around the country and driving me to Stansted Airport so I could catch a flight to go and do TNA or PWG or Chikara or whatever it was. And, you know, years and years and years of doing all the social clubs and the community halls around Wales and wrestling in front of no one and all the injuries and all that stuff. Like, it all built to that moment. And I think that's why I just feel, why it's so sentimental to me and why I'm so proud of that moment.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, because at the time you and Flash were tag team champions, you know, like the Dirty Dogs and Robert Roode and Ziggler were the champions. You know, FTR were the SmackDown champions. Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, the NXT tag team champions. And even the Kabuki Warriors were the women tag team champions. So I want to throw a dream universal scenario here, Mark. So let's say you five in a match. Which stipulation would you like to be for that mega tag team match? All five.
With all those teams?
All those teams, bro.
And you want me to choose the stipulation?
Stipulation, and I'll throw as well, where would you like it to be held? You know, in the UK, Cardiff, or maybe somewhere in the States?
So I'm gonna go and say Cardiff. I'm gonna say Principality Stadium, where Clash at the Castle was. That's the one left on my list to tick off. And stipulation. Oh, I'm trying to think where we'll have the best odds. You know, it might have to be some crazy ladder match, you know, get 5 sets of championship up high. It would be very hard to win trying to unstrap all of those championships. Maybe we might just need one universal hook for all of them. But I think, yeah, nice a 5-way tag team ladder match for every tag team championship in WWE in Principality Stadium. That sounds good to me. That's what I would do.
You'd be looking like Ultimo Dragon with all those belts now. Jesus. I mean, hey,
yeah.
I mean, that'd be a hell of a creative entrance on 2K20. I mean, very good indeed. But obviously, as well, you know, you would be a part of the game as well. You were in 2K20 as well, and being part of like a WWE wrestling video game, I can't imagine that's like I'm in a game. You could have me versus Bret Hart. Cool. I mean, that could be a tick off like I'll like the bucket list, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think two big things for me when I first signed to WWE was being a part of a video game and having my own action figure. Now, I wasn't lucky enough to have the second one, but I'm so grateful that I was able to be on the game. And the whole process is really fun. You know, we flew out to Las Vegas to get scanned for it, so like it was all just like a really really fun time. It's a shame that that game isn't seen as a great one in history. It's seen as one of the lesser good ones. I remember playing it for the first time, and I'm pretty sure my eyebrows suddenly like appeared above the head of my character as I was running around, and you know, it would glitch and I'd end up on the outside of the ring. But I had fun with it regardless, and whoever did the move set for that game smashed it, because they were busting out moves that I hadn't used in WWE ever. Like they did like a vertebraker in there, that they'd watched my indie stuff for whatever moves, you know, to get the moves in there. So yeah, hats off to whoever did that. I appreciate the extra effort they put in.
They paid attention and they brought it to life. You love to see it, Mark. And obviously with NXT UK, you know, sadly it would shut down and, you know, just be gone, sadly. And I've had, you know, Wild Boar who was there. I've had Addy Robson, Tate Mayfairs who did some matches as well. So I want to know, Mark, say maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, and a young upcoming wrestler comes to you and says, "Oh, I know you were in this thing called NXT UK. How would you describe it? How would you, you know, explain NXT UK to someone in the future?"
Honestly, I would describe it as an incredibly underrated area of the professional wrestling industry from back in the day. Because, I mean, again, I know some people really didn't like it. Some people hated it. Some people said it was the death of indie wrestling in Britain and all this stuff, which I don't believe it was at all. I think it was the peak, really. I think you go back and you look at those cards, especially pre-COVID, but even if, you know, because fans make everything better, you know, let's be honest. But even if you look at some of that stuff with the empty arena stuff in BT Studios, it is some of the finest wrestling that you'll find of the last 20 years, I think. You know, we look back at the cruiserweights in WCW as this amazing golden era of that style of wrestling, which maybe at the time wasn't appreciated to the extent that it should have been, you know. And you watch back Ray versus Eddie Guerrero from Halloween Havoc, and all the matches between Malenko and Jericho and Eddie and Ray and Juventud and all those guys, all the, you know. And I like to think that one day NXT UK will be appreciated in a similar way, because you cannot argue with the in-ring content of that show. There was nothing like it happening in the company at the time. You know, NXT at the time was like, especially pre-COVID, was absolutely smashing it. Was incredible. And I'd still say that NXT UK actually consistently might have been stronger wrestling wise. Maybe not storyline wise, you know, I won't go that far, but wrestling wise, bell to bell in ring, nothing in the world I don't think could touch it. And it's a shame that obviously it being the bottom of the totem pole in the company naturally means that it'll be pushed less, and you know. But I'm incredibly proud of not just what I did there, but what the entire roster did. I really do believe that it was like some incredible wrestling that went underappreciated.
Hey, honestly, Mark, be proud of it, my friend. You know, guests I've had on, you know, maybe younger, and they watch NXT UK. It spoke to them. It got them involved. So you and that whole roster, be proud, because you did something good for the whole British scene. Honestly, my friend, be proud of that. I mean,
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad that you were a fan, you know, because as I said, some people weren't, but I think it will age well anyway.
absolutely. And before we move on from NXT UK, let's look at maybe some good times. I want you to share maybe a favorite moment backstage or a story traveling from the NXT UK days.
Oh, there's a photo somewhere on my phone before the first takeover in Blackpool, and it was Mustache Mountain going out there against grizzled young veterans for the NXT UK Tag Team Championships, the first ever champions. And me and Eddie Dennis were backstage. I think I'd wrestled on the pre-show, and I believe Eddie was on the actual show actually. So yeah, he must have been getting ready for his match or something, or maybe he was done as well. And we found the Tag Team Championships backstage, like before the show had started, or after they'd been back, and we had a little selfie with them, just because we thought on the indies we tagged as FSU for years, and we thought it was a funny moment where we were like, I wonder if this will age well. I wonder if, you know, 5 years down the line, we'll end up tagging up here and winning these bad boys, and this will be a nice throwback. But that's one of my that's a fun memory for me. I was just stealing the belts for a second and having a little, you know, kind of taking the piss photo, a little selfie of us with the straps. And then I'm trying to think of any other, you know, I mean, it was all fun, honestly. It was great. But probably too much to mention. That's one thing that sticks out anyway.
Hey, it just shows you had a great time, and it's the main things you want to have in this business. Now, obviously, after NXT UK, you know, you would do some other stuff. I know you went to good old Impact, and Impact, I feel like it's a company that's been slept on. You know, like just how not like it's really a shining diamond that not a lot of people are viewing. I mean, what was it that made you want to go to Impact and, you know, show off your stuff and eventually become tag team champions?
I mean, just like you said, you know, it's kind of this hidden gem of wrestling at the moment, and I feel like it deserves more attention than it gets. You know, similar to how I felt about NXT UK at the time. Impact is putting on a fantastic product week in, week out. So when we had the opportunity to go out there at Emergence, first of all, back in, I think it was May, we're going up against Bullet Club. That's a team that we had on our list to, like, someone we wanted to face. The fact that then the next day the card got changed, and that morning we found out we were going up against Motor City Machine Guns. I mean, that's real bucket list stuff, you know. For me and Flash, they're a team that we look up to. That's really like the top team in the world that we wanted to face. So that was the main reason we wanted to go there, to kind of face some of the best tag teams in the world that were in Impact. The fact that we then got brought out again, not just once but twice, and then did the UK tour, won the tag team titles in that time. It just, you know, we felt very, very grateful that they wanted us there amongst such a strong roster of so many talented wrestlers. And I'm really, really glad that we got to do that over the last year, because for me, you know, my first time round at Impact, I didn't tick off that list of winning a championship belt there. I had a fantastic time between 2014 and 2016, but I never got to tick that thing off the list. So I was really grateful that, again, not only did I get to do it, but I did it alongside two of my best friends in Flash Morgan Webster and Dani Luna. And I hope that, you know, this won't be the end of us working with Impact too. I hope in 2024 you'll see us there again, but who knows as of right now. But I am hopeful for it, because it's a fantastic environment, great place to work, and as I said, some of the best wrestling on the planet, and it deserves more attention.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm rubbing my hands excited for it, not just because it's -1 in Scotland right now because of the old winter time. But there's a really great image I saw on your Instagram as well of, you know, Dani with the Rev Pro titles and you and Flash behind with the Impact titles. And I've always been fascinated about promo pictures. You know, when I get them for guests coming on and finding the best one out of 600, and you're sitting there like, oh God, they're so good. Can I only pick two? But going into that image, you know, and just seeing, you know, with NXT UK shutting down, and now you're here, you know, Impact titles and the Rev Pro titles, that evolution from the shutdown of NXT UK, it's got to be something, mate, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, I think it's as I said, like ever since leaving NXT UK has been a pretty crazy time. You know what I mean? A pretty crazy ride. But I think from being released from NXT UK, the year of being back on the indies, so much changed personally for both me and Flash, and Dani. Actually, she was recovering from an injury. Flash was at the time. In that time, I had my first child. You know, I got married. Flash got married a week after we won the championships as well. So it's been such a crazy time, both professionally and personally. But it did feel like a nice journey, you know, through highs and lows, going from being released and even from pre-COVID, you know, winning the championships in NXT UK, and then COVID happening, and then getting released, and then all the way up to winning the Impact Tag belts. It's been a crazy ride, but one that feels very fulfilling, you know?
No, absolutely. And obviously, you know, Impact will come over and do the UK tour and the two gut checks as well, one in Glasgow and one in down south. I know it's yourself, Dani, and obviously Flash against Moose, Brian Myers, and Deonna Purrazzo. Hell of a matchup there as well. But I want to know in your thoughts of Impact doing this tour. Do you feel like this is showing that Impact, as well as the gut checks, have got a really good eye on the UK scene for talent?
Yeah, I think so. And I think they always have, you know, like way before NXT decided to come over and do something in the UK, or before ITV set up World of Sport. TNA were always doing British Boot Camp, right? You know, that's how they first got Spud. And the Blossom Twins, and you know, it's how they got me initially. But they had a much bigger focus on the UK than any other wrestling company did. So I think when they've come over here and done this gut check now and done this tour, you know, they've always been aware of the talent over here, and I hope that leads to more TNA stuff in the UK, because there's always been such a good relationship with the UK fans and TNA. I think from previously back in the day, having it shown on Bravo and Challenge, and now it's over here on DAZN. I believe that's how you pronounce it. So I really hope that that continues going forward, because I think right now it would be great for British fans to have an alternative, especially on TV, you know, a big presence in the wrestling world outside of WWE over here in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the alternatives are always good. You know, I describe wrestling as like a pick and mix. You can have a bit of this, bit of that. You don't have to be forced to have that one part of the pick and mix, probably like the really soft brownie that's like stale for 2 days. You can leave that be.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah, you always leave that bit.
oh, absolutely. I'm just trying to save the calories. If I go anymore, I'm going to bust out this suit. So I really need to try and stay into shape. But obviously, with Impact, they're rebranding to TNA next year with their first pay-per-view in the year. And I want to know your thoughts on that rebrand. But they're going to have new titles. Obviously means new tag titles. Would you like them to go back to the old classic TNA Gold tag team design?
Oh, do you know what? I mean, I think I would, just so there was the potential to win the TNA Tag Team Championships on top of the Impact ones. That personally, selfishly, I would like them to, yeah. But I do love the design of the Impact Championships. You know, the slim center plate and all. I'm a big fan of it. So, so whichever they choose to do, I'm all for.
No, absolutely. And what's your thoughts on obviously the rebrand as well? Because some people were kind of shocked, like, oh, we're going back. You know, do you feel like it's the time now to embrace the past of Impact with TNA?
I think so. I think that when people think of TNA, they still think of the X Division from back in the day. They still think of, you know, well, they think of TNA. You know, like it's so hard for Impact Wrestling to kind of separate themselves from TNA. So I think embracing it is probably the best thing to do going forward. You know, they've got that nostalgia. They've got fans kind of excited that that brand is back, and people have been calling it TNA for years, even when it's been branded as Impact. So I personally think it's a great move.
No, hey, absolutely. So it's just an overall joy to see new wrestling coming. I'll take it any day of the week. Now, obviously, Mark,
Exactly. Yeah.
I know as well, Mark, you've had your own show, you know, with the BBC, you know, your love letter to wrestling, you know, season 1, 2, and 3. And obviously, I'm like, with my show, you're like, I'm surprised to get some guests. Like, oh, wow, they're going to come on. I'm so excited. Who was a guest you were really surprised to have on your show?
Oh, I tell you what, I was surprised we got was Paul Heyman. Just
Dude.
because you know, you assume that that man is too busy to be doing interviews. But yeah, I was surprised we got him on. I was surprised, and this unfortunately never, you know, actually ended up happening. But there was a second there in season 1 when we had The Rock. And I
Oh,
sat there in the BBC studios for 2 days waiting. Not 2 days straight. I went home, but the first day we got a message saying sorry, they had internet problems or something like that. And we only had 5 minutes with him as well. But said, oh, we got internet problems, and we waited for an hour, and we waited 2 hours, and we waited longer. Oh, maybe tomorrow it'll work. We tried again the next day. There was no chance it was happening. So for a second, we had The Rock, which I was very excited for. And hey, who knows? You know, hopefully again in the future, maybe it'll come back around.
hey, I'd be happy to see that as well, my friend. But obviously, you know, the BBC, they've got great programming, you know, Doctor Who, EastEnders, Casually. So I wanted to pose a little situation to you, Mark. I want you to place yourself, Flash, and Dani in a BBC show. Which one would you place each of yourselves into?
Oh, BBC show. I'm trying to think. Well, I mean, Doctor Who is filmed here in Wales, right?
Right?
So maybe we'll be the little robots? What are they called?
Oh, Garlics or something?
There you go. Throw us in those. Going around
Oh,
with the subculture music playing, you know, shooting bad guys, whatever they do. I can't even say I watched Doctor Who. That's real guilty of me. I put us forward for that, and I don't even know the name of those little robots.
well, who knows? Maybe we can see you on Strictly Come Dancing or something.
There you go. Whack us in there as a trio. We can throw
Yeah,
out some pretty cool dance moves, I reckon.
I'll give it a shot, my friend, indeed. But also, you know, Mark, there's many great characters within the UK scene in general, you know, media and wrestling. But you met probably one of the most villainous ones. Absolute terrible, you know, scarred the mind of children. You met at Riot Cabaret, Mr. Blobby.
Ah, my friend,
Oh,
he was an absolute legend. What a pleasure it was to be on a show with Mr. Blobby, and he's coming back. He's coming back later this month at Riot Cabaret, which is wild. So, and I'm gutted that I was meant to be there at that show, but recently, unfortunately, had a calf injury, so I'm no longer going to be at that show. And I was so excited to see him again backstage. An absolute legend. And you know what? The biggest draw in British wrestling right now, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm sure that Riot Cabaret tickets have been flying off the shelves since they've announced Mr. Blobby. So yeah, he is a draw. He is the draw that the UK needs right now.
Yeah, he's a draw, but he's scarring the mind of the UK youth since what 1989. So
Yeah, very true. Yeah, he is a bit scary, to be fair.
God, it's making me tie my tie just to make sure I'm all safe and secure in my little. I'm all good. But also, you mentioned you have a band as well, Mark, Junior. And I've listened to it on the Instagram. Phenomenal. I love the music. It's a good banger. I'll put it on the workout playlist. But I want to know, say if Junior was given the opportunity to make a wrestling theme for any wrestler out there right now, who would you like to make a theme for?
Oh, I'm trying to think who would have a good. Well, do you know who's a big fan of pop punk? Is Alexa Bliss. Big fan of Bowling
Oh,
for Soup and that type of stuff. So maybe she'd be a good one to make a theme for. I would say Rhea Ripley, but to be honest, I'm not sure we'd go that heavy. But we give it a go. We give it a go. Maybe we could do Rhea Ripley. And on top of that, who else? Well, you know what? Matt Hardy was famously in one of our music videos, so maybe we'd pay the favor back and do a modern day pop punk version of the old Hardy Boys theme.
That is going to be in plenty of people's Spotify raps next year.
There
So
you go. Yeah.
I'll pick it, my friend, as well. But also, I know as well, Mark, you're also an owner of Attack Wrestling, a great place as well, which I've seen on Instagram. So I want to know, Attack, what was the story behind that?
So Attack was a company that was actually initially founded by Pete Dunne and Jim Lee, who was our MC for the longest time. We've all been friends for years, right? We were all wrestling back in the day when we were kids. And within a few shows, Jim had to take a step back because he had a real life job essentially to go and do. So I stepped in. So it's a company that me and Pete ran for years and years. And then over the years, when we, different priorities came up, like I went to TNA, we had other wrestlers step in, like Chris Brooks, and he was helping run it for the longest, a long time, quite a few years. And over the years, it's kind of just been a wrestling company ran by wrestlers. We had to stop during COVID. We went on a hiatus. And then when the time felt right recently, well, earlier this year in January, I decided to bring it back with the blessing of, guys like Pete and Chris, because to be honest, it had such a kind of, it took such a strong area of the Welsh wrestling scene, and I always felt like it was the biggest platform in Wales, but it never really reached the heights of its potential. So it never really made it up there with the likes of an ICW or an OTT or a Rev Pro or a Progress. And I thought, well, now is a better time than ever. The Welsh talent at the moment is incredible. The scene is really, really strong. So now is the time to bring it back and try and make it that platform. Now, don't get me wrong. We're not there yet. We're not, but we're making the steps to get there. And that's something that I'm really going to be focusing on even more next year, as I have been this year too. But just to really try and make there be a stronger platform, a bigger platform for wrestlers in Wales in Attack Pro Wrestling. So fingers crossed that happens.
Absolutely, my friend. And also, I know I'm correct. Wild Boar's your champion right now for Attack, correct?
He is, yep. He's on a pretty strong tirade with it as well.
Oh God, damn! The man's absolutely well. He is Wild Boar. The man's ferocity incarnate. So
He
he
is,
does
yeah.
the job. But something I've been interested in, and I spoke about this with some in the Welsh scene, a Welsh super show. Many other promotions, Gower, getting Principality, and book a massive supercard. So I want to know, Mark, if you could have Wild Boar defend the Attack Championship in this supercard, who would you want to see him against?
Oh, there's a few names I'd love to see here. One being Rhino. I know that, uh, you know, I know that the Boar, it takes a lot of inspiration from Rhino. So that would be what I'd love to see. I think they had a match back in the day, but I'd love to see a rematch between him and Sammy Callahan as well. That's another dream match. Who else would I love to see him against? I mean, he's straight up. I'll say this right now: is I would say maybe the most underrated in-ring performer in the UK. I feel like he gets his flowers here in Wales, but I feel like people outside of Wales don't necessarily appreciate how good he is. But yeah, those two matches, I'd love to see him versus Josh Alexander as well. That would be an absolute banger.
God damn, you're making the dreams going, Mark, man. Jesus, this is dream matches are coming all around. But obviously, as well, as I mentioned, our UK scene is thriving. And obviously, we mentioned, Impact coming over for a tour, WWE did Money in the Bank, Clash the Castle, possibly rumors of WrestleMania. Hey, Ticketmaster, Ticketmaster is going to be fun for that. Great. Thank you. And obviously, AEW All In coming back next year for Wembley. And I want to know from your point of view, Mark, seeing these big companies come over and do all these shows, and obviously with NXT UK in the past, do you feel like their presence here is basically validating our scene to maybe overseas viewers as well?
I hope so. I really do hope so. I mean, you know, when they come over for these big pay-per-views like Clash at the Castle, like a potential WrestleMania, or like when they did with Money in the Bank, there always seems to be a lot of wrestling festivities around that weekend. You know, so there's a lot of indie shows going on, and like, you know, pub quizzes, for example. You know, there's a lot of like wrestling content happening in the area. So I hope that that alone gets eyes on, you know, the country and the scene over here. On top of that, you know, there's always stuff like you always see British wrestlers pop up on these shows, whether it just be seeing Butch in the Money in the Bank ladder match, or whether you see, you know, Doris and Brendan White being beaten up by Roman Reigns on SmackDown. Whatever it is, you end up getting a bigger British presence seen by the world. So I really hope that that does translate in a bigger way and gets more eyes on our little scene. Well, not even our little scene, our fantastic scene, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, indeed, my friend. And obviously, and I want to now propose some dream situations for you, Mark, my friend. I want to know if you could have you and Flash hold any other UK tag team championships based on design, because you just think that design would look so good. You're 8x10s, get them on the merch table, sell a wee couple cheeky ones. Which title would you want to have around you and Flash's shoulder?
Oh, what? So which title that we haven't yet won?
Yeah, I gotta know.
So I've got to go ahead and say either the Ring of Honor or AEW Tag Team Championships, only because, you know, we've already had one in WWE, we've already had one in Impact. I feel like the one to tick off the list now is AEW and Ring of Honor.
So I mean, we could potentially see you and Flash against better than you, baby, Adam Cole and MJF, or
I hope
maybe.
so. I do hope so.
I mean, hey, I'm throwing out a crazy one here. What about Subculture Trio versus the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass?
There you go. Yeah, let's do it. Let's get Dani Luna involved. We love a 6-man tag or 6-person tag. So yeah, we love it.
Oh, that would be a banger deal. But you know what? As well, we'll mention AEW All In. Let's throw another dream scenario, Mark, my friend. I want you to book yourself and Flash and Danny in a match at Wembley versus someone on the AEW roster.
Oh, so as a six-person tag.
As a tag and Danny as a
Oh,
independent.
okay. So for me and Flash, I think it's got to be the Bucks or FTR. I'll go with the Bucks because I know Flash has worked years ago at PWG, and I worked Nick Jackson back in Chikara back in 2011. But I'd love to do it as Subculture versus the Young Bucks. And for Danny, I'd love to see her against Ruby Riot, my good friend Ruby Solo. Sorry, Ruby Solo. That'd be an absolute banger of a match. I'd love to see those two, you know, lock up in the ring.
Oh man, I hope it comes to, because I've got my AEW tickets booked in, so I'll be sitting there. Pints that are 10.50 because Wembley prices are insane, but I'll be happy all around. I can't wait to see it. Hey, let's make it a real thing. But
Let's do it,
Mark Andrews, my friend, thank you for appearing here as the 100th episode of the Soul Sessions. A real honor. But obviously, before we sign off here, a final thing. I want to know if there's an international wrestler watching from the States, maybe in Japan, France, or Europe, anywhere, and they want to come to the UK to learn. What benefits can they get from learning from the UK scene?
Oh, tons of benefits, man. I mean, this scene over here has been, even though not on the platform it needed to be for so long, there has been so many shows going on here for so long. You know, our history of camp shows around the company, around the country. It's a place to come over and get your reps in. It really is. Not only that, but like traditionally, like the training that we do over here and the style that we do, it is the best place in the world to learn that kind of that mat wrestling, that chain wrestling, that technical wrestling. So yeah, I would suggest loads of American wrestlers to come over here, and not just necessarily to try and get on shows, but to train. Honestly, go to training schools around the country. Come down to NWW in Wales or NWW in the Midlands, or train up north. You know, train in Scotland with Andy Wild. There's so many schools, real credible ones too, and then there's just so many good places to work. So yeah, I would suggest that any wrestler comes over to the UK to just add another feather to their cap. You know.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. If you're in the States, get your visas checked and get on that Ryanair flight over here, because you will get that learning opportunity. But, well, Mark Andrews, thank you, my friend, for coming on. And as viewers will know, if you want to learn more of Mark and see where his journey is going, I will include a link to his Instagram, but I will also include a link to Attack Wrestling as well. You can click on that, go see a few shows, support your local indies, and just see great wrestling from the Welsh scene. Honestly, folks, get that link clicked. Well, folks, I would say the whole YouTuber stick, but it's been around since 2005, so I ain't going to bother. I actually think you guys know what's going on. Well, here we go, folks.